What's up,
Make sure you're unmuted.
Yeah, well, that like for real, I figured I had to get that part down on this go round, or you'd make fun of me. So I'm not muted today.
Perfect.
I'm not muted. Welcome,
Appreciate
Rebels. Welcome to the. What is this? Our third or fourth annual Rebel Rally Live. It doesn't really matter. We're grateful to you for being here. Jeremiah and I are in a good mood. Are you in a sassy mood though, too, Jeremiah? Or are you just like straight Jeremiah today, like no sass?
I mean, generally, my kids are home. You know, they can come in and out and start fighting with each other and stuff. So it kind of depends on their mood, I guess, a little bit. But
let's cross our fingers, ladies and gentlemen. We might see some sassy Jeremiah today. I'm excited about the brilliance of what could be.
Or kids running in their underwear. If a kid runs like in here and he's in his underwear, or she could possibly even be in her underwear. Just be aware.
We'll have grace for you. And I'm sure there's plenty of parents out there that are like, yo, dude, like that's a daily occurrence at my house for sure. So welcome, Rebels. Looks like a lot of people are hanging out with us today so far at the start of this thing. Shout out to my boy Nick Donnelly, an Arsenal legend. I'm just kidding. He's gonna be so mad that I just said that. Manchester United. Okay, Manchester United. How's that? Does that feel better, Nick? Thanks for being here, bro. What's up, Emma? What's up, Amanda? What's up, Joanne? So we got a lot of stuff that we want to talk about today. We're going to jump into it. We want to encourage everybody, though, this time around. Listen, if you've got good things to say, that's great. Throw them in the comments. You might see them pop across the screen here like this, right? Like, oh, well, we started, and so we started. Sometimes we start a little late.
You don't want to flash across the screen.
Yeah, be careful about what you put. But also, we'd love to hear some questions today as we're going through the topics. We figured that today we'd actually talk about as a general conversation. We talk about quota and quotas and our take on quota and quotas. But at the same time too, like we want to just chat. We want to chat. We want to hear what's on y'all's mind. And as we're having conversations and talking, we would love for you to jump in and interrupt us and ask us about things that are important to you as well too. And yeah, we'd like this event to be a little bit more community centric and minded. So please feel free to throw some things that you're struggling with in the sales world or not. Maybe they're even in your personal life and you're not afraid to talk about them. Like any kind of encouragement we can give you, any way that we can help you. This lovely Friday, we'd be happy to. With that said, Jeremiah, what are you doing today? How's your day going so far? All right, tell us a little bit about what's going on in the life of Jeremiah, bro.
It's good. I mean, it's Veterans Day, so shout out to all the veterans. There's a lot of them on LinkedIn. We appreciate your service. My dad's retired military. My father-in-law is retired military. I got lots of veterans in my family, and they all make fun of me because I'm like the only one that's not a veteran, at least among the men. So I did have to rib my brother-in-law a little bit though, because my sister put a post about like how he's given 30 years of his life to our country in the military, which is great. It's awesome. But he's like a what we call a full bird colonel. So he's not a lieutenant colonel or anything like that, but full bird colonel. So he actually makes really good money now. So I had to tease him a little bit, like, oh yeah, you're serving our country. He's like in logistics, he's not overseas, or I don't even know if he's ever been over there. But just teasing him a little bit, like, yeah, I got a lot of friends that would like to make what you make in the military, but no, it's all good. So it's all in good fun. But yeah, Veterans Day is definitely very meaningful for me. And I know you have some military connections in your family too. So definitely a big shout out to all our veteran rebels. But yeah, I mean, as far as like the day goes, it's been good. I'm still at home as usual, going to my first concert in a while tonight with the wife. So it's good. It's good.
Good stuff, man. Hey, who got you tickets to that concert? Just out of curiosity.
That was a Rebellion gift right there. So I know nothing about this band that we're going to see other than a YouTube video I pulled up, but they look cool. So we'll see. They're like fiddlers and things like that. So it's like,
listen, if Rogue One, the hand of the rebellion, Shay Madison herself is picking the musical act, it ain't going to be a bad one. That's all true. I can say to that. So shout out to Shay.
Credence to that for sure. But But yeah, so what about you? It looks like you're actually home.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you teased me the last couple lives for being home, but I'm home, and I'm happy to be here. And today's going to be an interesting day because shout out to James Say What Buckley. We're about to hang out, grab some lunch, and enjoy some fellowship. Y'all, if y'all don't know who James Say What Buckley is, you probably not be following the rebellion. You probably not be on LinkedIn, quite frankly. But shout out to that dude. Go find James Say What Buckley on LinkedIn. Follow his content. Gobble it up. The dude's a genius.
Is it his birthday or something? Why does he get to
It
hang
was
out?
his it was his birthday, and I actually have birthday gifts for him from the rebellion and from myself. But
Nice.
you know, we're hanging out because he lives here and I'm home, you know. So that's a cool part about being here. There's some other homies in the area too that I get to hang out with. Derek Nave, shout out to Derek Nave. He lives maybe a couple hours, but he comes to Knoxville every once in a while, and I drive 30 minutes to go hang out with him, and vice versa. So yeah, I love being up here, to be quite frank with you. Like, I miss home. I miss Orlando for sure. It's always going to be home, but this place is it's irresistible, bro. So we decided to hang around here for Friday and for the weekend because why not? You know, why the heck not? Let's be rebels in our backyard. How's that?
Yeah.
So, bro, listen, quotas. So a lot of people talking about just in general talking about quotas from the perspective of them being unattainable or like the bar being set too high. And I feel like that's a hot topic in the sales world out there. There's a lot of people talking about it. As a matter of fact, I didn't realize how many people were talking about it until I suddenly just started like scrolling my feed enough. And I'm curious about the rebellious take on this and diving a little bit deeper into the subject. But I wanted to hear from you from your own perspective, and just like even going back to being a rep, high performing rep at the last two orgs that you were at, especially at Catapult, and just maybe just a little bit of like your own take and perspective of being a top performer and having to have some type of quota or revenue goals, how they made you feel, how you operated within them, and just a little bit of reflection for everybody watching.
Yeah, this is definitely an interesting topic because I had a little bit of conversation with a couple of people last week, this last weekend on LinkedIn about setting targets and setting quotas and leadership's perspective and expectations and things like that. And I was like, oh, we should definitely talk about that on the live. So, but I'm going to go with a pretty strong viewpoint and say that quotas are kind of like bullshit. Sorry, BS. So to this degree, so this is what I mean by that, because I was at a company where I was at like 300% to quota, and then the next like closest person was at like 34 or 36%, and then there was other people below them, and so nothing happened to them. They weren't let go or anything like that, and I wasn't advocating that they should be or anything like that. It didn't matter to me. But it's basically it's arbitrary. You can do whatever you want with it, essentially, as the leaders. The leadership can say like it's a justification to do what they want. So if they like you enough, I guess they can keep you around, and they can just ignore the quota. If they don't like you, or they don't like what you're doing, or whatever, or if you come to HR with something that they've done wrong or whatever, then they can use the fact that you're below quota or something to to just let you go. And so I know that there needs to be measurables and there needs to be accountability around things and stuff like that. But it's really mostly what it comes down to for me is that it's mostly the way that people do quota, right? Like the way that a lot of leadership does quota, and what they're how they're holding people accountable to things, and the fact that it's not the same across the board. So again, if someone is liked better by leadership, they might get a pass on the quota, whereas somebody that's not, they could be at the same level, but they don't get a pass on the quota. And so it's just it's never like a straight thing across the board, or so it seems. Maybe there are some companies that are, but that's my quick hot take on quotas in general.
Good hot take, bro. We had a good comment here from the man, the myth, the legend, Tim Stanley. Owners stress on setting these two. What a great statement. And really, there's two versions of that stress, right? There's one where it's like, well, what's reasonable, and what, and because we have to have a quota, right? What's reasonable, and then there's the other side of the stress, which is, am I like the thought of, am I making the quota hard enough to attain to push my people to get there, right? So there's like a negative and a positive, that kind of can be played off both of those too, but it's a couple different versions essentially of stress. And here's Joseph Miller. Upper management draws a number from thin air, and then you're on the hook for it. Isn't that the truth, bro? And I think one thing to just make mention is we're not saying that every organization does this or is like this, and that not every salesperson suffers from mismanaged quotas or poor leadership around what quotas should, the particular purpose of a quota. But one of my biggest takes on this is just the fact that if I would have just tried to hit my quota, which was $40,000 a month, and it was a pretty standard number for the copier world, entry level sales rep, 40 G's a month is what we want you to write. The base salary is X, based on the quota. There's always something that ties back into it. And I think I do think that ultimately that what happens is that people do, organizations, I should say, and leaders they decide on quotas based on what they're going to pay you in salary. They decide on quotas based on the revenue that the organization wants to ultimately hit. How's that, Beth? At the end of the year, right? But the thing is, that I believe is that it constricts and constrains people. So if I would have just hit 40,000 every month, that would have been my goal to kind of like have a job and keep a job. We're not really setting the right example for salespeople in that case, right? Because if I just was going, hit my quota this month again, hit my quota this month again, I'm not personally getting much growth out of that. Right. And you and I can have this conversation, right? Because we're two guys that have exceeded quota in our lifetime more times than we can count, and not just the monthly, but the annuals. At summer, I would be at my yearly quota. It was always a goal of mine. I loved getting the President's Club letter in the mail, addressed to my wife. Dear Shauna, congratulations to Dale and yourself for
having such an awesome husband.
That would have been troll mode 1000 if they would have done that in the letter, right? But I enjoyed those particular pieces, but it was really for me, it was the idea of like shedding the weight of the quota and creating my own standards and saying, well, what do I want? What does Dale Dupree want? Where do I want to go with my career? And how am I enabling myself by looking at things like quota or revenue attainment in a healthy way that created a vision for me, right? A lot of the time we look at a quota as something that shackles us. And really, I mean, that's what it ultimately it does to most salespeople, or creates stress or pressure. And again, there's a lot of people out there in the old guard or part of the sales world that say things like, well, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the whatever. I think it's the kitchen. And like, listen, ladies and gentlemen, I hear what you're saying, but that is no way to lead people. If you want to help somebody to understand what they can accomplish, don't tell them that they have to be able to suck it up and handle a $30,000 or $40,000 a month quota, because that's just the way it is. Instead, help them reverse engineer the concept of the 350,000, 60,000 that you ultimately expect them to write for the year, and say, how do we get to this number? How do we break this down backwards and figure out the outcomes more effectively? And really, it comes down to this perspective of, why hasn't leadership changed on this subject? There's a lot of people out there that don't have quotas inside of their organizations, and they thrive a lot differently. But most leadership would look at that and they'd go, how do you operate like that? How do you do that? Right. It's kind of also the concept of unlimited vacation. I don't mean to like compare the two necessarily, but when you tell your staff members you have unlimited vacation, they actually take less. Or that was a study that came out last year, right? Like, actually, people are actually taking like less,
Right.
And what they're ultimately using it for is like to go somewhere and work, remotely, for a month. And There's all these different things that have come of this concept, right? Get rid of the quota and see what happens, right? It's not, your people are not in the bullpen selling because they want to make the salary, right? That's not a thing. But when they're beat down constantly by the quota as something that gets them the rewards, right? Oh, you didn't hit quota, so you only make 1% of the revenue in your commission instead of 70%. It's like it's a constant beat down, right? And then you get to the end of the year and you go, all right, I think I've figured this thing out and how I'm going to hit quota all year, every month or quarter in and quarter out if it's quarterly. And they raise your quota at the end of the year. Hey, good job, almost get in there. We're going to make it harder for you. And yeah, again, it's like this dictatorship of what ultimately a company believes your success looks like instead of you personally. What do you think, Jeremiah? Am I off on that? Is that a little ridiculous?
No, yeah. No, I mean, it's basically like a tunnel vision that, on quota that it doesn't really, like, it doesn't help people grow, to me. Like, you're just, again, like you said, it's shackling. It's locking them into this very narrow thing rather than something that could be much, more broad and fulfilling, and beyond, just this number that they've got to hit. And that's really, to me, like that's the thing that's missing. It's just used as a number to essentially, control people. So.
Totally agree, bro. So there's a comment in here about personal goal attainment. I'll just throw this up here. I haven't even read it yet, but I read the first portion of it and I totally agree with that. It should be about when you welcome somebody into your organization, especially as a leader, and you're teaching somebody about what it is that their expectation looks like. The expectation, the word expectation is much more appealing to somebody than the word quota. Right. And really, it is about language at the end of the day, too. There's such a negative connotation to things like quota in the first place. And so really setting a standard and saying, hey, like, here's the standard, and the standard exists because we still want to encourage you to operate around this number to be able to achieve something that you'll be proud of and that you'll want to stick around at our company and hang out with us if you achieve it in the first place. And to me, like that's there's so much distance in what I just said and the actuality of how a leader operates in their organizations. And listen, and I'm not just saying that from experience from being a rep in those bullpens, but also from being a leader and being around multiple other leaders. And as we go through ideas, finding that 11 out of 12 people disagree with me on this subject. And also like being part of the sales rebellion and going around and talking about this, whether it's in an SKO format or a workshop or in one-on-one training with VPs of sales and them disagreeing in most cases, like, whoa, how do you operate without a quota? Most of the time it's kind of mindless, though, that when you get the feedback and that you find out it's like mindless. The fact these quotas are mindless. They're there because of some kind of old school metric or tactic we've always done it this way. It's that whole argument, right? Instead of instead of thinking more about, like John had said, the personal attainment of that goal and what you get from that, right? Leadership being there is more of a help toward the goal, right? Instead of saying that quota is the only thing that matters, right? It's just, if that's a standard, and to say, look, if you want to have the kind of success that we desire for you, you have the very minimum, you have to hit this number. But please understand that this is mediocre operating right here at quota, right? What we do every month is we go, shout out to Luke Frazier. He's at 101% of his monthly quota. Great freaking job. Like as if somehow the dude just parted the seas and cured cancer. And listen, I'm okay with celebrating people hitting standards and like winning at the end of the day, but give me 200% of quota and let's blow that up as part of the culture that we're all trying to build as a unit, and not just giving it to Luke either, right? Because there's also that unicorn effect. When we create the quota, some people figure it out like I did and go, the quota doesn't actually exist. That ultimately what exists is my potential and what I can achieve inside of this organization. And my company, North American Office Solutions, when they bought my father's business and we did the transition, that means a glass ceiling. Not only was it a glass ceiling, but like the glass ceiling existed like right above my head, right here. that I could break. It wasn't way up there, right? It was right here, right? And I literally smashed that thing with both hands like day 30 at the organization, and I felt empowered by that. I felt that my own personal goals mattered at this organization, and that I even had conversations at times with my mentors and bosses at the organization where they said the quota is just a thing, where they would even admit it themselves. But again, it's where when people got fired from our organizations because they were at 0% of the quota or 11% of the quota, and that's a behavioral problem. That's a consistency problem. That's a mindset issue. That's a problem with the individual. Like, why are you in sales? I would challenge anybody out there that's having a hard time hitting quota or that below it to say, well, what is your daily operating procedure? Because it sounds to me like you're just measuring yourself to the mediocre standard and not hitting it. Like, well, what is above that? And how are you seeing past what's sitting in front of you? And also your problems, right? As you try to scratch and scrape to get to this quota that's just, as Luke says, the puppy quota. You're welcome, Luke. We're honored that you're honored by the puppy quota. Steve,
Yeah.
good to see you, bro. So looks like Steve Watson here. If you guys know who Seismic is, check out Seismic. Great organization. Steve Watt, one of the greatest marketing minds in the world. This dude is an incredible human being. Good to see you here on the live, bro. We appreciate you. So Jeremiah, the thought for me, bro, is the idea behind like what makes an elite seller, right? We throw that word around like candy these days, right? Be an elite seller, and I'm curious, what for you as an elite seller, the top of the team, what drove you to become what you were at a place like Catapult, where your numbers were so far reaching that they would had to have hired an army of people just to keep up with the revenue that you were bringing in? What went through your mind and what was the main focus?
Yeah. Well, and I like what John was saying too, because basically, like the quota itself isn't a bad thing. Like quota is not evil. It's how you do it, right? And to me, like a lot of places, a lot of directors, direct sales leaders, that are the first line, like right over the reps. They will essentially use that to kind of blame stuff on the reps. But I guess as an organization, wouldn't you want the more focus to be on that leadership, and what the leader is actually doing, and how they're managing those reps and things like that. But most of the time I think it just falls on the rep, and so we just get rid of the rep for not hitting their quota, and then you don't really realize until maybe it's too late that like the rep wasn't really the issue all along, right? And so quota itself isn't bad. It's the way that a lot of people are doing quota. So as far as your question goes, like as a top rep and what quota meant to me, or like what my view was as a top rep, I think that was your question. Pretty much.
That is correct, sir. That was my question.
Yeah, and I might be a little different than other folks too, because I came from an entrepreneurial background. So I had owned multiple businesses at that point. I jumped back into sales. So I definitely had a different viewpoint from before I was in entrepreneurship, when I was in sales then going into it, and then coming out of that. So I looked at my territory and my job in general as a rep as more of a business. And, I needed to own that. And it wasn't just my job to hit this number. And so I had personal goals that were, outside of just hitting a number, like what that could do for me. And it was so limiting that like I was never going to, concentrate on this number, because it just seemed stupid, right? Like, well, why am I going to make that the purpose of my life, right? Like hitting 1 million in sales or whatever, the number is, like, why is that the purpose of my life, or even just the career part of my life, right? Like that is just not, it wasn't fulfilling to me. So when I looked at stuff, it might've been a little different than most people do just from that entrepreneurial background. But I approached it as like, what can I really do? Or how can I use this position to, help me reach my personal goals, but how many people can I impact on the other side? How can I impact my company, for good? And so it was just a lot broader and greater than, what a lot of people might feel like when they're just focused on this, one number that they've got to make. And that's when you don't hit it, right? Because really, like, I think when I first got back into it and I was struggling a little bit with outreach and stuff. And so I wasn't, where I wanted to be. And then I started to actually like kind of narrow my focus. And then when when I started to coach with, I was a student of yours, it kind of turned back around for me. And so that's when I, was able to refocus and so obviously things just kind of exploded from there. So that was really, my take on it. And, I think why top reps succeed.
That's good stuff. There's a really good question that popped in here later. Joseph Miller, thanks for being here, bro. Appreciate you sticking around. Appreciate all the great statements. We love you, man. Joseph Miller, if you don't know the homie, go grab his LinkedIn, pull it down, hit the connect button. Dude makes great content. Awesome salesperson, awesome sales leader. This is a great question by Luke, though, who had to jump, but maybe he'll watch this. Is there a healthy way to get to some version of quota? So here's what I want to do. I want to take the rebellious outlook, right, like we always do on this topic, and I want to break it down real quick for everybody as we wrap things up and start to end this Rebel Rally live session on this beautiful Friday. It's actually crappy outside. It's like rainy and gross, but it's a beautiful day anyway. There's people here, and that's all that matters. I love people. It makes it beautiful. The rebellious take on quotas and having a healthy version of a quota is exactly as some of the comments that have popped up in this thread spell out. Quota is a crappy concept around KPIs and creating some kind of intrinsic motivation because it lacks purpose. All that's attached to it is money, ultimately. We never teach people what can be done with that money, as an example, outside of like just keeping your job because of the quota that you hit and being happy to get some type of paycheck in the first place, right? And if we are teaching about money, we're teaching it in a way that's not something that is healthy from the perspective of the way that a rep is supposed to be building their career inside of an organization. We say things like, oh, you got a $10,000 check. What kind of fancy car are you going to go put a down payment on? Instead of helping somebody to understand that the ultimate impact and change that you can create with those dollars. And I'm not saying that something suddenly you have to like have a quota that ties back into like we'll give to a charity at the end of this quarter, but those are very intrinsic things that can drive people to attain quota differently. If we speak the love language of people and what the success truly means and looks like for individuals, will change the game for those folks. And here's a great example. I have a mentee that I've known for several years now, from back in the days when I was still selling copy machines and just started to transition into the sales rebellion. And his focus was absolutely on making a lot of money and becoming rich. And there's nothing wrong with that. In sales, like, you can have that if you'd like it. Throughout the time that he spent with me, I always encouraged him to look toward that success and to spell out things that were not just attainable, but also that would fulfill and make him happy, which he was always confused about. Okay, but money should make me happy because I'd come from none of it. And I totally agree that, especially for the people that don't know what it is, I was broke as a joke before I was making good money. I was going to have to move back in with my parents with my wife. Like, that's pretty bad, right?
Yeah,
but I mean,
even though your parents are cool.
Yeah, well, thank God my parents were awesome people, because nobody else would have entertained that. No other parent in the face of the earth, right? But I digress. For me, it's really just about that motivation of helping people to see that happiness and fulfillment, and also setting that example. Because over time, that same mentee, and we just had a conversation the other day where he said, I realize that it's actually quite easy to make money. I've figured that part out. That sure, there's hard work involved. There's a lot of sacrifice. There's grit. There's more to it than meets the eye, and that what most people say. But that at the end of the day, I've figured out how to make money. But that what I've found is that there's this gap in the way that I feel, as far as my happiness and my fulfillment are concerned. And like, they're just two words, right? Happiness, fulfillment. Most of you hear those words and you think those aren't hard things. The reality is that they're extremely hard things to find and to progress toward, because what gets in the way in a lot of cases is the flesh, is the desires to have status, to be made of money, to show that off to people, even to some extent, to live and keep up with the Joneses, instead of understanding that in most cases it's the most basic things, like a quota that is tied to satisfaction for your customer, an attainment goal that is based on serving other people, because that's what sales actually is. Sales is service. Sales is putting others before ourselves. Sales is servant leadership. It's the idea of building something that is unbreakable from the perspective of community and the outcomes of what it is that you put together, because there is emotion attached to that. There is a loyalty attached to that. There's something much more than just like you were the cheapest price and so we went with your company. Or because you want to know who actually makes the quota? It's your clients. It's the people you seek to serve. It's not your boss. It's not yourself. And sure, your hard work will pay off without a doubt. Your commitment to selling more and selling better will pay off without a doubt. Your commitment to rebellion against mediocrity and the status quo will pay off, but only if other people are bought into the way you make them feel and how you fix their problems / serve them in their businesses. So really, at the end of the day, we got to look at quota being tied back into your rebellion and what it is that you're building intrinsically, just as much as what you're gaining extrinsically, the outcomes that you're achieving. It's a big picture perspective, right? But it's a rebellious way and a mindset that we take very seriously here. We teach our students, teach sales leaders, and we teach each other internally inside of the organization, and we teach this great community that showed up for this awesome Rebel Rally live session. So Jeremiah, you got any like closing thoughts?
LinkedIn user agrees with you.
That's actually the sales rebellion. No. Sorry, that's Shannon. What's up, Shannon? Yeah, that's Shannon. I like Shannon a lot.
I just saw
see her in my content a lot.
I just saw LinkedIn user.
Yeah, and that's what it says on the screen right now too. Nobody, she's got her settings set up.
I've seen Shannon. I like Shannon too. So
Shannon's awesome.
I got you.
It's good times.
Cool.
Rebels, we appreciate you being here, and I'm going to let Jeremiah throw some last thoughts in, and then we'll wrap things up.
On quotas, yeah. So, I mean, I pretty much echo everything that you've said. We've talked about it at length. You know, we could probably continue on for another few minutes or an hour or more on what quota should be about, whether it should be a team quota or individual quota and all that good stuff. But yeah, ultimately, I can't really add much to that, from what you've said. So it should be much bigger than what we are making it out to be ourselves in general. Some of that is not always on the organization. At the end of the day, people don't make you have a narrow mindset, right? They can cultivate that kind of, but it's still up to you individually to decide whether or not you're going to have what mindset you're going to carry into it. So you can still choose to not be constrained by your quota as well, and what your company is defining that as, and what they're trying to define, if they're trying to define you in relation to your quota and things like that. So you still get to choose ultimately. So that's my final thoughts on it.
Awesome, dude. Great final thoughts. Hopefully some awesome encouragement for all the rebels out there that are watching. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here as always. You can find out more about the Sales Rebellion by just clicking down below, which you can't do. So you got to go to your web browser and type in www.thesalesrebellion.com. Head to our resources page. Check out all of our tools for sellers, our podcast, our Slack channel. Come get involved. Come join the rebellion in whatever capacity that you see fit, whether it's one-on-one coaching, whether you got a team of rebels that you're looking for an SKO, and for us to come out and spit some fire. We don't really care. We just want to serve. At the end of the day, whatever capacity that looks like, just reach out to us. There are no dumb questions. There are no obvious questions. There's only rebellion. We love you all. We appreciate you being here. And take it from my man, Jerome, if you don't take it from us.
She's never accepted a cold call. Again, prior to meeting Dale, I had 0 deals. was thinking about quitting, and I went to a company here in town dropped a crumpled letter for the lady. She wasn't in, but I got her name, all that information, and I left her a crumpled letter. And she called me. She vetted me before calling me. She reached out to a few folks in town who knew me or knew of me and asked them what they knew about me before. And then she called me. She told me she's never accepted a cold call or done a deal with anyone who made a cold call. She always would, if she needed something, she would go approach someone, right? And she said that the crumpled letter was so unique and so authentic that she at least had to find out what I was about and what I had to offer.